Today, we're going to learn about the value of natural soundscapes for our health and well-being. So now it is my pleasure to turn things over to my colleague, Halamat Olamade, who will introduce our guests. Halamat creates our social media content, which I hope you all read regularly. She also writes about ecology and other topics for our blog. So thank you so much, Halamat.
Thank you, Trish, and welcome everyone. We're honored to have our two exceptional experts joining us today, and their work helps us understand and appreciate the natural soundscapes that surround us. The first panelist we have is Dr. Rachel Buxton, who is an assistant professor at the Institute of Environmental Science and Department of Biology at Carleton University. She leads the Biodiversity Conservation Solutions team, which generates knowledge to support equitable conservation solutions. Dr. Buston's research interests include soundscapes, seabird ecology, ecological restoration, and systematic conservation planning. Her work helps us understand how sound shapes ecosystems and impacts both wildlife and human health. Our second panelist is Heather Wolf, a Brooklyn-based photographer, educator, and author of two wonderful books, Find More Birds, 111 Surprising Ways to Spot Birds Wherever You Are, and Birding at the Bridge. Heather also works with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology as a web developer, bringing her passion for birds and technology together to help people connect with nature. Together, our panelists will share insights on why natural sounds matter, how we can better listen to and protect them, and what these soundscapes mean for both ecological and human health. Dr. Buxton and Heather, welcome and thank you for being here. Dr. Buxton, we'll turn it over to you first.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Halamat. It's great to be here speaking with you all. As Halamat mentioned, I'm a professor at Carleton University up in Ottawa in Canada, and I'm going to give you a really broad overview of the science behind the health benefits of natural soundscapes. So just to start off, sounds are all around us. I hope you can hear the sounds in the background on this slide. Natural sounds like this dawn chorus on a lake in Ontario, they make us feel relaxed. The sounds of nature have long generated powerful reactions in humans, from inspiring music and poetry, here I'm thinking of Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, to providing some of the stark symbolism that actually ignited the environmental movement. I'm thinking here of Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring. So sounds, they confer a sense of place, and they really connect people with nature. So before we get started, let's talk about what a soundscape is. So a soundscape is the collection of sounds that we perceive in an environment. It includes those from biological sources, like bird vocalizations, geophysical sounds like sounds from wind and rain, and human-made sounds or noise. And we're going to talk about the problems associated with those sound sources in a little bit. Let's also talk about why soundscapes are so important. So if we remember back to, physics, high school physics, sounds are minuscule fluctuations in pressure. The threshold of pain in humans is the pressure equivalent to a 1.6 meter change in altitude. And the threshold of hearing is 1/1,000,000th this amplitude. This is why we measure sound on a decibel scale, because of this sensitivity to sound and this enormous range. But it really makes us think, why are ears so sensitive to sound? And it's not for speech. It's not to hear me talk. The answer is that soundscapes provide crucial information for both wildlife and humans. Many species rely on sound to communicate with each other. But most importantly, sound perception enables most species, humans included, to surveil their surroundings. And for some species, like the vole in this video, hearing sounds can mean the difference between life and death. Now, for humans, soundscapes are a very good indicator of signals of safety and signals of danger. Sounds are really an important sense in humans. It's one of the first senses to develop in utero. And hearing sounds has a whole bunch of different downstream health implications. So when we think about the diversity of sounds in our soundscape and how this could potentially influence our health and well-being, we have to think of this in an evolutionary context for humans in particular. So if you think of a soundscape that is full of different types of sound, from plants, leaves rustling in the trees, different animal life, so different types of different species that are singing or vocalizing. This is a pretty good indicator that this is an environment where most of our needs can be met. We have lots of things to eat, lots of things to build shelter with. And so what's going to happen in that sort of environment is we're going to go into that rest and digest mode. This stimulates our parasympathetic nervous system. So what that allows for is recovery from any psychological stress and allows us to replenish things like attention and recover from fatigue. Now, in the opposite situation, a soundscape that has very little different types of natural sounds, maybe there's no sounds of water, there's very few different species vocalizing, not very many different sounds from, vegetation. What's going to happen in that sort of environment is that some sort of action is needed. And what happens in that case is we start surveilling our surroundings. And that stimulates our sympathetic nervous system. Another way of wording this is our fight or flight response. And being at that level of surveillance or that sort of low level of stress for long periods of time can lead to a variety of different health risks and downstream negative health outcomes. Okay, so that's sort of the evolutionary significance of the number of natural sounds that we hear in our environment. So to get at a sort of a summary of all of the different health outcomes from listening to natural sounds, we performed this systematic literature review. This is just a fancy way of saying we did a science on the state of the sciences. So we gathered all the different studies that have been done looking at the health benefits or health outcomes of listening to natural sounds. So we were pretty broad in this study. We looked at all the different outcomes along the pathway to good health. So this is everything from annoyance or mood all the way to actual metrics of stress like cortisol and that sort of thing. So we gathered all of this evidence together. We put it together in this literature review. And from all of these different studies, we found that, first of all, the most surprising result, I think, was the breadth of positive health outcomes and positive health benefits that natural soundscapes confer. So this included benefits for things like our mood, cognitive performance, and then decreasing things like stress and annoyance. So decreasing pain. There was one study that looked at the amount of pain that people perceived during painful surgical procedures and whether or not they were listening to natural sounds. And decrease in things like heart rate and other metrics of stress. So these models, bringing together all of this scientific information, really demonstrated that natural sounds improve our health and what's called positive affect, so things like our mood and perception of an environment, and decrease things like stress and annoyance. So one other neat thing that we did in this study was we actually broke down the different sounds into different types. So we looked at studies that looked at water sounds versus bird sounds versus just all different natural sounds in an environment. And the results were kind of neat. We found that water sounds had the largest effect on improving health and these positive affective outcomes like our mood and cognitive performance. And that bird sounds had the largest effect on decreasing stress and annoyance. And I think this water sounds one is really interesting, right? Water is a basic resource that all humans need. So it's not terribly surprising that this would, improve our mood and have benefits for our health. But it's also used a lot in urban landscapes as like a landscape feature to enhance acoustic environments. So things like fountains and other water features. So not only can these be used to mask noise, they also improve our positive perceptions of urban green spaces. So one last really neat thing about this study, and I think this is perhaps the most compelling for folks who live in the city, like myself. We looked at all the different types of comparators. So some studies compared natural sounds to noise. Some studies compared natural sound to nothing, just quiet. Some studies compared more different kinds of natural sounds to fewer different kinds of natural sounds. And then a few studies compared noise, just listening to sounds of vehicles, to listening to natural sounds with noise in the background. And we found that this had the largest positive benefits on downstream health outcomes. So this is really good news for people who live in the city where you might go out, you might listen for natural sounds, you might go listen for birds, but there's always going to be the sounds of the city in the background. This study suggests, or these series of studies suggest, that you're still getting the health benefits of listening to natural sounds. So putting this all together, what does this mean? This study, we found that natural sounds confer health benefits. And so more and more now we talk about managing soundscapes within a city, but also in park settings. And this means a couple of things. So, the most obvious here is noise management. So managing human-caused sounds, in parks and protected areas. But also, I don't know if a lot of you have seen this paper, we've lost about 3 billion birds since the 1970s. That's an enormous decline in the number of organisms that are producing these natural sounds in our environment. So when we talk about managing a soundscape, we're not only talking about reducing noise, we're talking about protecting those species that are creating those natural sounds. Just one note here, really this talk, I was hoping to talk about, the benefits of natural sounds, but, this is about quiet communities. So a lot of my research has also been looking at the pervasiveness of noise or human-caused sound and how it is disrupting ecological functioning. So, we had this one paper where we showed that harmful levels of noise pollution for wildlife are present in about 2/3 of parks and protected areas across the United States, really staggering levels of noise pollution. And in another paper, we showed the different ways in which noise pollution is disrupting ecological functioning, from masking, so this is just covering up important communication between different species, distraction, humans and all other animals have a finite amount of attention that they can pay to different tasks, and by listening to and paying attention to noise, that is diverting their attention away from important things. And misleading, this is where species may perceive noise as an actual threat, which drives up stress levels and can actually shift different populations away from a noise source. There we go. Okay, so just to finish up really quickly, my research lab really started from a place of, what are the benefits of natural sounds? There are many. What are the problems associated with noise pollution for wildlife? Again, there are many, and noise is very widely distributed. So now my research lab has really shifted from what's the problem, what are the benefits of natural sound, to how can we make things better. And so I have students really across the board who are looking at things like what are the outcomes of different noise reduction techniques. In this case, we're looking at a shuttle system instead of allowing traffic into a local park. What are the health and biodiversity benefits of urban restoration? So in this case, this is a project in Detroit where we're trying to restore different prairie grassland areas to boost bird numbers in the inner city, not only for biodiversity, but also for people's health and well-being. And then another project where we're looking up north at indigenous-led inventory and monitoring using soundscapes. So how can we, support folks in monitoring their biodiversity using sound in particular? And I would be glad if you had any questions to answer them at the end. Also, please don't hesitate to reach out. Here's my email and my lab's website. And a huge thank you to all these bright young minds for supporting our research.
So, yeah, Rachel, that was amazing. I'm so inspired, and it's so great to know the science behind how all of these sounds can benefit our health. I mean, I know just for me, so I have a birding patch, which is a place that I bird often. It's in New York City, in Brooklyn. It's under the Brooklyn Bridge pretty much. It's called Brooklyn Bridge Park. And even if I can just make it out there for 5 minutes and hear, a bird rustling in the leaves, like you mentioned, or singing, it just immediately improves my mood. And I notice most days I get out there, and I notice the days that I don't, I'm not in as good of a mood. So, I mean, that's definitely proof of that, and it really makes a difference. So I want to start today. I'm going to show you some of the birds that are making these beautiful sounds in the habitats, and a little bit about how to tune into them. And also the different types of sounds they make. They do make vocal sounds, but other types of sounds that you can also detect when you're out and about. So this is my favorite bird in the world. And a lot of people are surprised that a sparrow is my favorite bird in the world. But this, you can see right away. I mean, it's got these kind of eyebrows with yellow in the front. Those are supraloral yellow stripes. And this bird breeds in the boreal forests of Canada, but it's here on the East Coast and the eastern half of the US and right now, and it's here all winter. And it has a beautiful song, and I'm going to play the song for you right now. Now, I've met a lot of people that have heard that sound before, but didn't know what was making the sound. So this is a white-throated sparrow. If you have heard it before and you haven't seen it, there it is. And its song is one of the reasons it is my favorite bird in the world. So obviously that's a vocal sound. I want to just give you some more examples of vocal sounds and species that are making these. Now, song sparrows, you could tell I love sparrows, right? This sparrow is found across the United States, and it has a much different sound, whereas the white-throated sparrow is more melodic. This has a little bit of pep to it. A little trilly sound. And this bird mostly sings during spring, not as much during the winter like the white-throated sparrow does, but it can be found year-round. Now, this bird is a migrating warbler, what we call that hangs out in the neotropics during winter months. So it's not really around right now in New York City and in most of the United States, although in the southern southeast you can find it. But this bird is the most common warbler in the United States, and I wouldn't say it has a melodic song, but it's like a cross between the melodic and just repetitive notes. But here is this.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come around again. And there are mnemonics for these sounds, so they don't always help me personally to remember them. It depends on the species, but for that one, it's witchety, 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 witchety. So you could think of that. A lot of birds have similar sounds too. We're going to see one later, the Carolina wren, that has a tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, which is very similar to that. But this, I work on the eBird project with Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and we offer a lot of science products that help conservationists and researchers based on all of the data that eBird users submit. Their sightings of birds all around the globe. And based on that, our data scientists have created models of the migration paths of a lot of these birds. So this is all because of people like you and me that are submitting our sightings. So this is the migration animation of the common yellowthroat. And this is winter, and you can see it's in the south, it's in the Caribbean, and then this is in the summer. It goes and breeds up in the United States, some of Canada, and then it heads back down in winter. And we have so many of these maps. They're all free to download, free to look at. If you go to ebird.org, click the science tab and go to status and trends. So it's really neat to just see the journeys that these birds take and how special it is to be able to spend time with them during spring and then the summer breeding season, if they breed in your area, and fall, and know that they are traveling, making a long journey to the south for winter. One of my favorite sounds too are the squeaky sounds of the American goldfinch. I love how they love to forage and hang by seed heads, flower seed heads. And this is a video, and you'll hear the squeaky sounds of this young American goldfinch begging to be fed by its parent. And you just see just that moment we had there with those birds, I felt I was much calmer just immediately. So when you're out there, when you're hearing these sounds, you want to follow the sounds, tune into them, and really kind of just observe the birds and spend more than just a glance, and spend a few moments seeing what they're doing, maybe from a little bit of a distance so the birds don't fly away. But you may witness these types of things, these beautiful feedings or courtship, and that extended period of time with the sounds of nature and viewing birds is amazing. This is why I love birds. This is why I really can't go a day without thinking or looking at birds. And there are so many amazing experiences like that to have. You never know what's going to happen next. There's always a surprise in store. And this bird, it's interesting because a lot of people may be walking around and hear like a cat sound that's not quite a cat, but turns out it's this gray catbird. Makes kind of a purring sound, and it also makes a mimic sound. So it sings during the spring. It's related to mockingbirds, so it mimics other birds to court and attract a mate. So it has quite a wide range of beautiful sounds, but the catbird is known for its meow sound. Another one that I love is these cedar waxwings. They're pretty nomadic, but they're found all over the United States. They have a very, very high-pitched sound, and they tend to flock and fly overhead. So a lot of times if you hear this sound overhead, just quickly look up, and if you see a flock, those are these cedar waxwings. Very high pitch. And then it's interesting, all the different types of sounds, the vocal sounds that these birds have. There are chirps, there are melodies, there are cross in betweens. This is kind of a squeaky northern flicker. I love this sound, and it's just a single single quick sound, but kind of interesting. And that's the yellow-shafted flicker. In the eastern half of the US, these flickers have yellow shafts on their feathers, and you can see this illustrated in this flight shot of the bird. And in the west, they have red shafts, and there is some crossover of these two species as well, but they're both flickers, but they have wildly different looks in flight. You may be familiar with the red-winged blackbird. Now, this bird has its shoulder pads or epaulets red with a little bit of yellow, and it flashes them, kind of expands them and opens them up to attract a female. But these birds also sing, and you can see this bird singing, moving through the marsh. And I'm going to play the whole video. And the end of this video, you'll really see how it's displaying those epaulets for the female. Now, we did hear a plane in there, and you see this bird does have to compete with the noise of the city to attract a mate, and it was doing a pretty good job there. And I know that this bird did find a mate and nest in that little marsh there in Brooklyn Bridge Park. Another interesting type of sound is a fluttery sound, once again, up above that swifts make. This is a chimney swift, and this is the sound of these birds kind of flutter like bats in the sky, and they're super tiny, and they really can't perch. They can't perch horizontally, so they roost in chimneys, and they kind of grab on the ridges of chimneys. They also roost in hollow tree trunks, but this is the sound of the chimney swift. And one favorite of many people is the wood thrush. This sound is just absolutely gorgeous. I don't hear this bird singing much in an urban environment. I've heard it a few times, but in larger parks and forests, the sound of this bird just echoes so beautifully. And here it is. That's the wood thrush. And this next bird is an oven bird. It kind of looks like a thrush, but it's actually a warbler. And I have a story about this bird. I know this bird's song by heart, and it's because one time I was listening to this bird. I heard this sound. It was like teacher, 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 right in front of me. So I kept looking for the bird. I spent about an hour looking for the bird. I was trying to get photographs for my book. I could not find the bird. And as I walk away, I see an oven bird just strutting out from the leaf litter, looking at me. And I realized that's the bird that was making the sound. And I couldn't find it because it was just deep in the leaf litter under some shrubs. And of course, I will never forget this sound again. So here it is. Oh, I thought it was going to go again. Maybe it's not. But you get the idea. Teacher, teacher, teacher. So do know when birds sing, and if you're following the sound, just look down as well, or just accept that it may be hidden and you have to just not get a glance and just sit there and take in the sound. And I'm sure many of you use Merlin Bird ID from Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and that's a great way to detect the birds that are singing, even if you can't see them. And you can also, in that app, find out tons of information about the birds, what their habitat's like, their behaviors, and their distributions. So we covered a lot of vocal sounds from birds. Now, one of my favorite habitats, as I mentioned, is leaf litter. And the oven bird is often in leaf litter, but it's a tiny warbler. It's very small. So it doesn't really make noise as it's walking through the leaf litter, from what I can tell. But there are plenty of birds that more actively forage with a double hop scratch motion. They're kind of jumping and pulling the leaves back to find insects and arthropods under the leaves. And the white-throated sparrow does this. A lot of sparrows do it. This is an eastern towhee, also a type of sparrow, fox sparrow. Leaf litter is teeming with birds. A lot of times you'll look at leaf litter, the big patch, it won't seem like anything's going on. But if you stop and listen and look, you might hear some rustling in the leaves, some scratching, as Rachel had mentioned, and kind of direct your attention to where that scratching is coming from. It could be a squirrel, but it could be one of these birds foraging. And a lot of times I'll notice this, and all of a sudden the leaf litter will come alive with dozens of sparrows that I didn't notice before. Another non-vocal sound is, or foraging sound, is the pecking of woodpeckers as they are drilling and looking for insects. They also use the pecking for another mechanism, which I'm going to talk about. But this is a yellow-bellied sapsucker, and it does have music, but you can also hear the squeaks of the bird and it pecking at the wood very gently. It's a gentle tap, and that's the kind of sound you're going to want to listen for to find woodpeckers. So you really hear that, and it's really subtle. But if you kind of, as you're walking through your local park or listening in your backyard, just listen for those subtle sounds. Talk about subtle. So eastern phoebe flycatchers, I recently discovered that as they are flycatching, you can hear the snap of their bill. I am not kidding you. People don't believe me. But if you see a phoebe or really any type of flycatcher perched and sallying out to catch insects, take a seat and just really tune in to what that bird's doing, and you will literally hear it snapping its bill. Here it caught some kind of a hornet or bee. Looks like a pretty big snack it caught, and this is a video of it just looking around for insects. And phoebes tend to move their tails up and down, so that's characteristic of that bird. Now, the last type of sound I'm going to talk about is a sonation, which is basically an intentional sound that is non-vocal. So you may have heard when a lot of doves take off, this is a mourning dove, they kind of make a whistling sound, like this is it. That is actually not a vocal sound. That is the wind moving in their wings, and they're doing that intentionally to indicate there's a predator around. Hummingbirds also, when they buzz, that's an intentional sound they're making, an intentional sonation to attract a mate or to assert territorial defense. Also, I talked about woodpeckers pecking, red-bellied woodpeckers and other woodpeckers purposely baying not to forage, but to attract mates or mark their territory. And this red-bellied woodpecker is actually pecking on the underside of the Brooklyn Bridge. So just to wrap up with birding, how do you build your birding song skills? Like, how do you ID birds? You want to focus initially on a single bird. Just don't be overwhelmed by everything. Just say, I'm going to pick a bird, and really analyze the sound. Carolina red with the tea kettle, tea kettle. And you see the tempo rhythm of that is pretty even. Tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, medium pitch, very repetitive, and medium tone as well, as opposed to something like a belted kingfisher, which is an even rattling sound across. So really analyze the sound. You can kind of write it down and maybe look up sounds like that. Also, watching the bird sing is really going to connect the visual to the sound, and that helps me memorize bird songs more so than just listening to a song without seeing the bird. Bird singing over a helicopter there, a good example of it really kind of powering through the city noise. And then if you pick your bird, you're listening to your bird, listen to it again at home. You can also go to ebird.org and look up that species. And we offer, you can click a link to listen to the bird, and we offer spectrograms, which are the visual representations of the bird sound. So if you hit play on this, as it went witchety, 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 that spectrogram would be, displaying and moving along. So this is a great way to learn bird sounds. Sorry about the siren, but in my book, Find More Birds, the number one way to find and experience birds is to follow sounds. Out of 111, that is the number one. And I just want to mention summer's also a great time to listen for sounds because you have young birds, birds begging, as we saw with the goldfinch. So anytime you hear an interesting nature or bird sound, definitely investigate it. And please do keep in touch. I'm at brooklynbridgebirds.com. That has links to all my social media channels. And check out my book, Find More Birds. So I'm going to turn it over for questions.
Heather, thank you so much. And Rachel, what a delight. And I think I can speak for everyone that this is just what we need right now to hear the sounds of birds and to just kind of put our focus in a positive place. So we have a lot of others in the chat have shared their delight as well. So please feel free to kind of look and see what people are saying. I have a question. That's one of my questions that I'll start with. And does it matter to our health if the sounds of nature are recorded? So if you go to the bird app or listen to sounds as we have here, are there benefits to public health? Do you know, Rachel or Heather?
That's a really great question that I get quite frequently. So when, talking about the science that we know of, all of the studies that were in this sort of review that we did were in a lab. So people were listening to sounds on headphones, and that is what people do to control for all the other sounds in an environment. So all of the results that you saw were based on lab experiments. So that being said, there are a lot of other benefits that you get from nature for your health that don't just involve listening. We have plenty of evidence that looking at nature, smelling nature, touching nature, all of those aspects are good for our health and contribute to the health benefits that we get from spending time in nature. So, throw on a bird sounds on your headphones. It's a great way to relax, but don't forget that that's just part of it, right? And the real benefit, the best thing you can do is to go outside. And that's really what's going to give you the maximum amount of benefit.
And I just want to reiterate, even if it's just for 5 minutes, it's going to make a huge difference. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true.
Yeah, Heather, I think it'd be interesting if you just spoke a little bit to the fact that you're a city dweller and, just how you find balance. And I think you've touched on it, but if you have further comment when we spoke, I found that fascinating.
Yeah, I think if you're not tuned into the bird sounds and if you start walking around the parks in New York City, it's very easy to focus on the helicopters, the planes, the sirens, and it can be quite a switch to tune into the birds and nature sounds. But once you pick one and then start doing that, then after you learn the first one or tune into that, start listening for the others, then it will be more common for you to hear those sounds over all of the other noise. When I'm leading my walks, people said, how do you hear that? I'm like, do you hear the crow? No, I don't hear it because I'm so tuned into it. So the more you practice, just like you practice yoga or you practice things for your health, if you practice going out and tuning into the nature sounds and the nature soundscape, it's going to get better and better and it will help your health.
Wonderful. Thank you. Halamat, do you have a question? I think you're on mute.
Another question for Q&A from Lauren Cooney. She did a kind of thought experiment when she was out hiking and found that consistent lower frequency noise from both a flying aircraft and also nature had different effects. So, could you talk about what is known or not known about how both sounds can be acoustically similar in loudness and frequency, but not necessarily experienced the same way and have different effects on our health?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, not to be trite, but it's complicated. So, there's a lot of things about natural sounds, no matter the frequency, that we just have an evolutionary mechanism to recognize. So, for example, stream sounds, the sounds of like a stream can be at really low frequency and can be very loud. And yet those sounds are really good for our health, whereas, the same sort of frequency range, a motorized vehicle is not good for our health. However, both are sources of masking. So I mentioned there's sort of these different mechanisms that noise pollution can affect, wildlife and humans. And one of them is covering up important cues. So the jury's really still out in how natural sounds versus human caused sounds affect these different mechanisms. So, masking being one of them. However, ecological communities have had, many millennia to actually evolve to be able to communicate with this sort of background sounds of water. Whereas, these sources of motorized noise are very novel. Um, so there, yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but there's also personal preference that, I didn't get into at all, but people often ask, there's a crow and it's cawing right outside my window and it's really annoying. So there's even different natural sounds that might not have the same effect on our perception. So there's a lot of just variety in people's preferences to acoustic environments as well. So it's complicated, but from an evolutionary perspective, ecological systems have ways of adapting to natural sounds that might mask different modes of communication, but these more recent noise sources, they might not have the evolutionary capacity to deal with them.
Thank you, Rachel. Heather, you showed the bird, I forget who it was, the ovenbird perhaps, foraging around, or one of your sparrow friends foraging around in the leaves. And, in my mind, from a quiet communities, quiet land care perspective, that speaks to the fact that it is important to leave leaves and not have such a manicured aesthetic. And we have a few comments about leaf blowers and land care. Do you want to just share a little bit about your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, that's a great point, Trish. Yeah, leaving the leaves is great for birds, moths, bats, all the habitat, also for the soil, for plants. But of course, there is a safety issue, especially on public parks, paths, that you do want to clear the paths so people don't slip. And I saw some comment, I think it was someone said in DC that the gas-powered leaf blowers have been banned. That's amazing news. That's great. I notice here in New York, I'm noticing more and more electric leaf blowers. The noise is much reduced compared to the gas, and obviously it's better for the air. So right. I mean, I think as a general rule, you don't have to clean up the leaves unless it's a safety hazard or unless it's molding and things like that. But leaf litter is an incredible habitat for the birds I showed and many more birds, blackbirds, grackles, all sorts of interesting birds. The wood thrush I showed forages a lot in leaf litter. It's just teeming with wildlife, so it's better to keep it.
Thank you. That's an important topic for us. Halamat, do you have another question?
Yeah, I have a personal question for Heather as a fellow city dweller. Have you noticed with the growing noise in the city and cities all across the country, a decline in the number of birds you're seeing? And have you noticed with the stress that this noise is causing more interest in people coming on bird walks and wanting to connect with nature?
Yeah, so I haven't really noticed too much of an effect of decline in the city, probably because they're used to the noise here. But one of my favorite stories comes from a paper on the use of eBird data, and it was about a marsh in Florida. There were some eBirders that noticed a drone. I guess it had it. I'm not sure how noisy it was, but it was over a marsh, and all of the birds stopped vocalizing, not just immediately, but for weeks. It basically affected, who knows, their mating and breeding and all of that. So the person that encountered this presented the eBird data to the park people and said, this is an important bird habitat. Look at all the birds here. Now they've stopped singing. And I'm not sure exactly the steps that through which this happened, but eventually they banned drones in Florida state parks. So I just love that story about how, people just like you and I can, report these sightings and use that eBird data to affect change. But yes, the people that come on my bird walks, they're definitely looking for an escape from city noise and city stresses and stressors, and the birds and the nature. Even we don't even have to see rare birds, just the common birds, and watching them forage and bathe, all of these things really, people keep coming back and they want more, and they spread the word to their friends, and it's really wonderful.
That's great. And Rachel, is there a way you found to raise individuals' awareness that's sort of head and shoulders above the rest? I mean, aside from presenting, are there resources that you found that help in your community and beyond?
That's a really good question. I think, the biggest motivator of change that I've seen in actually getting action on reducing noise pollution, for example, is community groups like yourselves. So, it really, like, the one of the last slides that I presented, a student of mine is looking at the outcomes of temporary road closures in a local park. So in a local park just outside of Ottawa, they now close the roads 4 days a week. And the reason is because people were complaining, mostly, I mean, in this case, it was road mortality of turtles. So that was, making people really upset. But they ended up closing the roads 4 days a week and instituting a shuttle system instead. And the reason is because people were really upset and made a big, sort of campaign to close the roads. So there's really no silver bullet. I mean, sometimes that happens and nothing happens. So I don't know what the special sauce is, but certainly any time I've seen actual action to reduce noise levels, I think the leaf blower is another really good example. Banning of a leaf blower. It just really takes the community banding together. And, sometimes the science really helps. So I remember I sat in on a like Banff National Park wanted to institute a ban on train horn whistles, and the city council invited me to come and give a talk about the science behind the effects of noise pollution on wildlife. And the motion was successful. So I don't know if that was because of their better understanding of the science or just because everyone was really upset about the train sounds, but having evidence in hand on the negative effects of noise pollution can really help as well.
Thank you. And we have a guest, Erickson from Brazil, and he's asking, not to stay on leaf blowers, but this is more about general product design. Do you find that eco design for products and services, machinery, tools, equipment, is the way of the future? And I also thought of just landscape design as well, which has really made some changes in Brooklyn, I know, and in New York.
That's a great question. Oh, sorry, Heather, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to mention that Brooklyn Bridge Park and other parks have berms, so they're meant to muffle sound. Like part of Brooklyn Bridge Park is adjacent to the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, and it really works. There's a berm that has a lot of birds too, and it muffles the sound. So I just wanted to mention.
That's helpful.
Yeah, and when you talk about
And
technological,
Rachel, did you have something to add?
oh, yes, sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah, so I just wanted to add, I think technology can only get us so far. So, an example I think of is the National Park Service, like about 10 or so years ago, trialed something called quiet pavement. And this is like a really porous pavement that absorbs the sound from vehicles. And it was really successful, it reduced noise levels by a huge amount. But that means that you have to repave a whole bunch of roads that go through national parks, right? So, as with anything, there's trade-offs, and technology isn't necessarily always the answer. It's the same with, noise absorbing walls. If you think about putting noise absorbing walls through a park, you've got all kinds of issues then with connectivity of different wildlife populations. So it really is a balance, and although technology can be helpful, it's not necessarily always the answer.
Thank you. And what countries are really kind of leading as far as raising awareness, and in terms of policy? Do you know the answer to that? Perhaps Rachel.
Um, I would say my answer is a little grim, but it really used to be the United States. It really did. Yeah, the National Park Service had a very, very active and successful Natural Sounds and Night Skies division that were mandated. It was the only federal organization in the world that was mandated to control and mitigate sound levels within protected areas. The division still exists. It's been shrunken pretty small, but it was pretty impressive for a federal organization to have a large scale policy like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is the reality that we face at Quiet Communities too. Once leading and now, yeah. So do the bird organizations like Audubon or others, Cornell, do they have specific noise, noise as part of their programs or their offerings?
I believe so. I don't know the specific names of the programs, but I mean the one that comes to mind is the light pollution one. Lights Out is a program through Birdcast and Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and noise contamination. I'm sure that there is some project centered around that. It's all, I mean, conservation, there's so many aspects to the bird conservation, and it seems like people really find their niche and cover all bases. And like you said, it's getting awareness, getting everyone else. Once they find out about the effect on birds, they really care. So everybody's kind of working together. We work together to spread the love of birds, and then people ask all of these questions about noise and light and window strikes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So it's part of the conversation, but not necessarily formally yet.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure on that. It may be there's so many programs that those organizations have, and I'm not certain.
Mhm. Um, so Halamat, do you have a question?
Yeah, so this is for either Heather or Rachel, but what are some of the best ways you found to raise individual awareness of the harm that their seemingly benign choices to create noise pollution, um, whether like through blasting music, gas leaf blowers, playing videos out loud on their phone, etc. And also like, do we think that putting the experience of animals and others who are bothered by noise, like the individual experience is the difference in the way noise is perceived by humans and animals. Um, do we think putting that at the forefront rather than the science would help get people to care more?
Mhm.
I mean, for me, because I'm so focused on spreading birds, sharing birds with people through walks and classes, I mean, I would say a big part is when they are out there experiencing the birds bathing, trying to court, trying to find a mate, trying to seek shelter in the snow. That's when they start to think about, oh, well, how do all of these things affect birds? I mean, that's my experience is when they can relate to the birds once they see them, but there are many ways. Rachel, what do you feel about this?
I think your best bet is always through connecting people with nature and with natural sounds. I think I don't think so. The last part of that was, is it the science or is it the other stuff? I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that showing people like going outside and listening to birds is magical and wonderful. And we have science that shows that there's something to that. There's actual physiological mechanisms behind that. I don't think it has to be one or the other. It can really be both. And just really sparking people's connection with nature and the natural world, I think is really the best way to go.
And this inspires me to add more of this content to the work we do at Quiet Communities. This is a piece we've wanted to add, and Halamat has really encouraged us to add, and Lauren Cooney. So look for it coming soon.
Can I make one last comment, Trish?
Yes, please.
And it's really more Rachel's area, but there is quite extensive science on the effects of man-made sound on different wildlife species. The last time we looked, it was really hundreds of articles, and yet people are not very aware of this. So do you have any suggestions how that information might get disseminated and in what form? Because it's quite extensive.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any suggestions for you. We've known for a long time that noise has negative implications for wildlife and for people. There is noise ordinance for this reason. There's, regulations, but again, I really do think that spreading connection to natural sounds for me personally has been more effective than harping on the negative effects of noise. I mean, I know that there are negative effects of noise and that it's incredibly frustrating. But in my experience, it's been a really tough way to actually motivate change. Another thing you can
Well,
do, so just sorry to finish that thought. Another thing you can do is there are now apps on your phone where you can measure noise levels. And this is something I've encouraged, folks from communities who approach me and say, like, this thing is happening in my neighborhood and it's causing so much noise and I feel powerless. You can now be like a citizen scientist with your phone. There are really good microphones on your phone, and you can collect measurements, and that's really good evidence that actually holds up with, policymakers or that sort of thing. So, um, you know, although I think, connecting with nature is sort of your best bet, also actually documenting the problem And doing that as a citizen scientist can be really effective as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for bringing up the point about, the negative and the positive. I think during COVID, people really were aware of what a difference the decrease in road traffic, air traffic, reports of being able to hear, birds and seeing wildlife come back. And that was, an unfortunate thing, but in terms of raising awareness, it was, I think, a very effective thing.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, panelists. This is a topic we are definitely going to revisit. I feel I'm eager to learn more. So, Halamat, do you want to close out this discussion?
I can. All right, so thank you so much to Dr. Buxton and Heather Wolf for sharing your expertise and passion with us today. Your work reminds us that protecting natural soundscapes isn't just about preserving beauty, but it's about safeguarding health, both for people and for the ecosystems we're part of. And if today's conversation inspired you, please consider supporting our work through membership, a year-end donation, or both. Together, let's make the world a quieter place for all. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Quiet communities.